So we had our recording going. I see people using the chat function. Please continue to use that to introduce yourselves if you like. And we'll also use it to share back impressions or questions throughout the day. Ben and I and Lucas, we're keeping an eye on that, and we'll try to be responsive throughout the day in questions as we move from one section to the next. And if we can't get to something and a question does emerge, we'll follow up after the session too. But as we start up today, I just want to offer up a brief framing and some context for where we're at, how we got here, and also where we're headed for today's session. So this series came to be, this might be coming natural and innate to you if you've been at the other two sessions, but it came to be out of response from many of you here and others throughout the world who sensed the wind down of the military mission in Afghanistan and the evacuation of thousands of Afghan individuals and families, that you wanted to learn more about how to use soccer as a tool to welcome newcomer Afghan arrivals to your community. And like Ben said, we've been so struck by how many people in this space are already doing this work and are coming to refine or learn more or continue to hone in on what you're already doing. But we had a lot of people outreach to SWB saying, we want to provide this soccer space, and how do we do it? So we were fortunate to be able to partner with Laureus SportsLab to present this series together and also make it widely available. So I just wanted to provide that framing and also an appreciation to the partner in Laureus SportsLab. Today, as many people know, it's the last session of a three-part session. If we go back to February, to late February, the first session covered approaches and tips for acting with cultural humility. And we offered up 4 different program design options for running a soccer program. And then 2 weeks ago, we moved into trauma-informed tactics and approaches that you can bring to the field when you're working with new Afghan arrivals, and really any young person that is in a soccer space or sports space. We got a brain science overview from Megan Bartlett from the Center for Healing and Justice Through Sport. And she shared back 3 R's, the regulate, relate, and reason. With regulate, using our survival brains, relate using our emotional brains, and reason being when we're using our smartest brain, or like our most evolutionarily advanced part of our brain. From Megan, we learned that we must regulate before we can relate, and we also must relate before we can reason. And we also learned that sport and soccer is an inherent space to regulate, because there's a lot of movement involved. There's a lot of rhythm involved that sport on its own provides a really wonderful space for kids and all of us as individuals to be able to regulate, because it has those built-in rhythms and movements that support our survival brain in finding calm and finding that regulation. So with that in mind, Ben and I really chose to zoom in on the relate and the emotional brain today. That, in other words, we term that creating belonging and creating a welcoming culture at SWB, that when we relate with each other, when we relate with the space, when we relate as individuals, people feel included. They feel like they belong. And we really see that as a basic need. Particularly, we saw this as a basic need throughout, and continues to see it as one throughout the pandemic. Feeling like you belong, it comes before reason, it comes before self-actualization. And when we're out on the field with newcomers, and also getting them to the field, the most important thing that we can do is to create a welcoming environment, so that people feel like they can relate, that they feel included, and that they feel valued in the space. So that's why we chose to zoom in on that today, and kind of how that series, our series of 3 connect. So our goals for all of you today are to gain an understanding of how to create a welcoming culture, or maybe so many people are already doing this work, leave with a few new ideas or inspirations for bringing some new ideas to your work. We'll do that by sharing back some key components of the SWB program model, and with the hope that inspires you to take a few, maybe 1 or 2 ideas away back home, back to your work. With that in mind, the last framing that I want to offer up is our mantras, which if you've been here 1, 2, or 3 times, now you're getting to know as well. And we know that routine is good. Maybe that's regulating for you to hear me say the mantras multiple times. But today we're focused on two of them, actually. One is that we're glad you're here, and the second is get them to the field. Our mantras, again, they're phrases that guide us, and they define our culture. We're glad you're here. It's all about setting a positive tone and a welcoming tone from the very beginning with every member of the SWB community. It's a mantra that I've actually said at the beginning of each of these sessions in the opening circle, because we want everyone to feel welcome, and we really want to appreciate everyone's effort for showing up. That's a really big deal. So that's we're glad you're here. The mantra of get them to the field, it's all about proactively planning for and addressing barriers. Those could be economic, cultural, linguistic, that could prevent a participant from participating in an SWB activity. We chose to include not just one, but two mantras today, because when Ben and I were prepping, we really started to zoom in on how important it is to be welcoming while we are getting kids to the field. And that we're glad you're here actually starts way before kids ever get to the field. For the newest arrivals in the community in particular, establishing a welcoming tone in our first interactions when we're inviting them to the program is absolutely essential to building trust that will actually get that young person to the field. So with that framing and that context, I want to pass it over to Ben, who's going to lead us through a panel of some experts from SWB of getting kids to the field. So take it away, Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Linz. And I really do just want to encourage people to use the chat to ask questions throughout, but also just to share any thoughts or observations or things that you've learned from some of your programming. I think that we're so enriched by stories from other folks as well. So please use the chat just to kind of echo anything that people are saying, or to share a story from your work, or just to kind of add some context or other information to anything that people are saying. So just like Lindsey said, I think one of the things that, having been in this space of support for development for 15 years, I think there's a lot of information around, when kids are there, what are some best practices. I think we don't often talk a lot about what it takes to get students out. And I think especially that's true with newcomers. So we're thinking about the Afghan context, a family who's just arriving to a new place that isn't yet familiar with the different institutions, different organizations, may have limited English proficiency in certain cases. How do we actually get that family to feel comfortable trying something new? I think sometimes we have this idea that for clubs, if we have a scholarship program, that people will take advantage of it, or if we rent a good soccer field across town, that people will come, which is not always the case. Those things don't always lead to engagement, and don't always reach the young people that most need this type of programming and could most benefit from the positive community that a team can be. And so thinking a little bit about that with this panel, we really wanted to give some real life examples from some of our different SWB sites around how we've been able to successfully bridge that in this context where so much is changing. There's so much uncertainty. There's so much unfamiliarity. And then you have somebody you don't know calling to invite you to this thing that maybe you've never done before. How can that be successful? And then once they arrive, how can we actually make it feel like a good space for them to be in? So with that in mind, we're going to hear from three experts from SWB at different sites in Boston and Baltimore. After we hear from them, we'll pivot to start introducing some more tools specifically from SWB program culture that kind of bring to life, or sort of are the back end of some of what Bruno, Kat, and Ryan are going to share. So with that, I'm going to pass it first to Bruno, who's the director of SWB in Boston. And Bruno, I'll just let you introduce yourself a little bit and share some of the strategies that you've been able to use to successfully get youth to the field and make them feel welcome once they're there.
Thank you, Ben. Hi, everyone. I'm Bruno Contreras, director of SWB Boston, originally from Mexico City. And I would like to share about our summer program in Chelsea last year. It was the first time that we offer a summer program in that community. And to give you more context, Chelsea is right next to East Boston, the community that we've served for the last 10 years. And we've been noticing that SWB families have been gradually moving to Chelsea due to rent increases and other aspects. And knowing that the population we serve was moving to a neighboring city, we did some research and found that actually 45% of Chelsea residents were born in a different country, and 30% of Chelsea public school students are new immigrants. And this has motivated us to start building relationship with the city that we can have an impact there. So when you start a new program or move to a new community, it is hard to recruit participants and build partnership when the community doesn't know you very well. So I want to share like 3 specific like approaches or strategies that we consider for outreach when developing our new program in Chelsea. And the first one was finding a good ally that aligns with your mission. The family suggested we contact one of the most well-known community organizations called the Collaborative Chelsea, an organization that has worked with the immigrant community for over 15 years. And our partnership with them is, I think, it's a great example of how you don't need to start from scratch with your program. Collaborations are great and help you to amplify your impact and tap into existing networks. And for us, like partnering with the collaborative made sense because families already trusted them. They have like a list of families and that they go to them. So also like they have a great relationship with Parks and Recreation, and I mean like securing field space is crucial for a summer program. The second approach or strategy, I call it fewer flyers, more actions. In Spanish sounds better, no? But 3 weeks before the camp, we had a registration day event, and instead of a traditional tabling and handout flyer, we brought food from the local restaurants, music, and we showed a sneak peek of what we would do in the summer program. So we have our top 5, our top best 5 drills, team builders for the parents and the kids. And so, yeah, I would say that participatory activities are more effective than flyers and tabling at events. And the final piece, which is like less of a strategy and more of an integral part of SWB programming, is to prioritize meaningful interactions with parents. Every year, Newcomer youth report that one of the main barriers to participating in the team is the family responsibilities and parents' permission, especially for girls. I think the first interaction with families is crucial to get them to the field. To give you an example, a family from Bolivia arrived 3 weeks ago in the country. They only speak Spanish, and they called us to find a soccer program for their daughter. It's the first time, it's the first participant from Bolivia in SWB Boston. There is not an important Bolivian community in East Boston, so for me, I think it was really important to connect with them. So I invited them to the Boston Golf 5 League. It's a futsal league that we're organizing only for girls from the community. and personally talked to the parents to make them feel welcome, explain to them about the program, learn more about their story, why they came, why they traveled to the US. Learn more about their needs and pointing them out to their to other community organization in East Boston that can support them as well. I think it's important to always put the youth and families like in the center of the conversation. And like in terms of like strategies we used to make you feel comfortable, trying something new. This is where, like our mantra, we're glad you're here, like comes into action. And in our program, like, all coaches go directly to each kid saying hello. That's golden rule, giving high five, fist pump, or a special handshake in the beginning of like the interaction or session. This is just like a basic way to say, I see you. And we're intentional about remembering their names and pronouncing them correctly. In the first session of this workshop series, one of our former participants, Hassan Mohammed, like shared with us like how discouraged and uncomfortable it was for him when people like didn't pronounce his name correctly. So we need to put an extra effort on remembering their names of the kids. The last one, like there are like a lot of like golden rules to make an inclusive environment, but we design inclusive practices and game experiences where every participant, regardless of their soccer skills, can experience success. Like it's our job that like at the end of the interaction, the session, they can say, I think I can make it. I can do this. I wanna come back. I'm pretty sure that like Coach Kat and Ryan will have like more stories about this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bruno. I really, really appreciate you sharing there. And I think just a really important point, especially that find an ally. I think that's been critical for all of our programs in Oakland. That looks like the school district, as well as local resettlement agencies. I think Bruno mentioned that list is really important. So in Oakland, we're able to do the school district through the Newcomer program at the district, get a roster of new arrivals. And there's been a lot of vetting from the district in order to give us that information, but that's what it allows us to start. And we'll sometimes make 1,000 phone calls, literally, like not exaggerating, 1,000 phone calls to get people out. We'll try families 3-4 times. A lot of times the numbers aren't working. And I think just that sense that how important it is to reach those young people. And you reach one, maybe they'll bring 2 friends. That's really how it sort of starts happening. So thank you so much, Bruno, for those 3 really concrete points. I want to pass it now next to Kat, who is our program manager at SWB Baltimore. So Kat, I'll pass it over to you to share.
Great, thanks, Ben. And thanks, Bruno, for sharing first. Ben mentioned my whole intro, but my name is Kat Sipes and I'm the program manager with SWB in Baltimore. And I think similar to Bruno, I think it's really important to kind of touch on these strategies that we have and that we use through stories. So today I'm going to tell like a little story about a girl named Faraha and how she really found her place on our high school girls team through different but specific outreach and a lot of relationship building, which I think Bruno touched on a few different things, but hopefully getting at like different ways to do these things as well. So to really get Faraha where she is today, we initially did a few house visits. We have really trusted community members that we use in Baltimore with SWB. And we do these house visits to get to know the family, but also for the family to learn about SWB. And it's something that we do with as many families as possible. It's definitely, like Ben mentioned, like doing thousands of phone calls. So it's definitely time consuming, but really, really important, especially when initially meeting a family. And this really just built a lot of trust and like right off the bat and excitement with her whole family. And just really a good way to get to know their family as well. So it's through these trusted community members and interpreters that we've really just built strong relationships with over many years, but they're great supporters of SWB, and that's just a huge strategy that we use, and we're just really lucky to have them. So before Faraha joined our high school girls team, which is her current team, she was a part of our summer program, and she and her family were new to Baltimore City and everything around her. They came from Tanzania in 2019. And for a little bit of context, our summer program is for newcomer youth grades K to 8, with our high school players, our older high school players, supporting the program with teaching and coaching. So it's a beast of a program, and it's really not easy to not feel intimidated at first. But the first thing I knew about Faraha was that she was always smiling. So I could tell that she warmed up to people who were nice and warm and silly. So I think another good strategy and like a really important thing is knowing that all youth, they react to different things in so many ways. So some want you to be distant, some want you to be more open and warm, some need more attention, and some just feel safe knowing that on their team, they can act silly and be vulnerable. So one of the main strategies I like to use is always trying to feel out when a student is first getting involved, what will make them feel most comfortable and welcome. So all of those different things that could be, which one is really best for that student. And you might not be able to do this with all 100 youth that you're serving, but knowing and seeing students that might be a little bit on the shyer side and might need extra push or extra support, that can be really key. So I think this is what first drew Faraha in. And then kind of getting into how she got to where she is now and really found her role on the team. After summer program, we have our year-round after school program. And this is for middle school students, grades 6 to 8, which when Faraha was like first starting with us, she was in the middle school grades. So I could tell that she was really timid and shy, especially when she was on the field with boys. So noticing this, I went up to her and pointed over to our all girls team, which was practicing, and her eyes just like lit up. So she really came out of her shell being on that all girls team. And even though she was competing against boys, I think it was that sense of safety and empowerment that she felt being with her team, what felt like now her team. And knowing that not every person is going to want to join SWB for the same reason. So whether it's soccer or friends or community, I think another strategy is really getting a sense of what's important to the specific student that we can offer, that SWB can offer, to make them feel welcome. Mattered to Faraha that day was being on a team where she felt safe and free. So now that she's really, really in SWB, literally every day, she's never missed an opportunity to be with us. I really just connect with her whenever I can. So I ask about her day, and when I see her next, I'm able to touch on something she mentioned last time. So true care and compassion and investment are things that you can see and feel, and youth can see and feel, and really just showing up for them 100% of the time. So yeah, and kind of to saying their name, maybe what country they identify with or language that they speak at home. Sometimes a silly question. And even though Faraha wasn't a new participant, she was new on this high school girls team, her team now. And she jumped right into this activity without hesitation. So she continues to show up every day, even when she gets lost on the bus and we have to go find her. But she's always one to practice speaking in front of others by giving a kilo or a shout out, regardless of her language level. She's just really confident and feels supported now. And I really think that trust that we built with Faraha right away by finding what made her feel comfortable when initially welcoming her and getting to know her family is the reason that she's an all-star participant today.
Thank you so much, Kat. Yeah, I think that's such a great illustration of just the way that initial investment of time and thinking about having a community navigator, somebody to come with you that has language and cultural fluency, allowed for this engagement to happen. That, you know, it could have been that she just came a couple of times, but now she's in this program that's such a vital part of her life and her trajectory. So that's a really, I think, just those stages, it's a really great illustration of those stages of what can happen when you make that extra effort to go out and welcome, and thinking about in the context of new Afghan youth coming in, just that initial effort to, you know, to really get to know them, to bring them in, to make them feel welcome. And then once they're there, there's so much that that they can benefit from all these programs that you all are part of in different communities. So we're gonna hear, I'm gonna turn it now to Ryan, who is a program coordinator in SWB Baltimore. And after we hear from Ryan, we'll pivot to start looking at some of the back end, some of the tools that we use that really kind of inform a lot of what Bruno and Kat and Ryan are saying. So I'll pass it over to you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ben. Again, thank you, Kat, and thank you, Bruno, for leading us off with some amazing stories from the field. I really appreciate that. So just like Bruno, first I'll introduce myself. My name is Ryan Gitonga, and I am a program coordinator at SWB Baltimore, specifically at our Vanguard Middle School program, that is co-ed. So the kind of story from I will highlight as we go through this is our SWB summer program that's at Baltimore. We typically reach 200 youth every year. And as Kat mentioned, this program is from K-8 with high school student support. I will particularly highlight our 2020 program, which was particularly difficult because of COVID. A lot of organizations and SWB in particular were scrambling to figure out how we could still offer our participants and our newcomers that same level of programming we always have, while in this new context and without having a lot of data that we now have with us. So there was a couple of strategies we used in order to create this environment where students were able to come and experience SWB, many for the first time. So one of our strategies was we asked ourselves, how do we meet our families where they're at? And how do we address the concerns they have and show that we care? A lot of parents were very concerned about this new pandemic that had just started, and a lot of them were very hesitant to allow their students or the players to come to programming. We had just wrapped up on a completely virtual program, and we could tell that something that the students really craved and really wanted was that chance to be together with their community in person. And so we had to do a couple of things in order to still achieve that while maintaining everyone's safety. So the main thing that we did is that we leveraged our community partners. We leveraged the trust that the families had in us that we had built over the years, and we worked to create more trust. So we used our community partners and our para-educators who have a strong bond in those communities. And basically we went neighborhood by neighborhood and had different neighborhood orientations. At this neighborhood orientations, we had our para-educators there to translate to the families, and also were there in order to make a bit of a space where parents could share their concerns and we could address them and show them that we were taking whatever they had, whatever hesitations they had, and that we are actively considering them within our program design. In some of the situations, it involved actively running or actively demonstrating how we were going to physically distance while having those neighborhood meetings. So we'd have the parents come and line up at cones that were 6 feet apart. We did the whole spraying hand sanitizer, and we even showed them how we would check temperatures as soon as the kids arrived, as we did with them. And going through each of those steps allowed our families and our players to know SWB cares, and these are the things that SWB is putting in place to make our community safer as we come together to have these practices. Once we eventually ended up having program, we were asking ourselves, how do we make these students feel welcome at summer program? And mostly that was in a couple of ways. Is one, being purposeful with the groups that we put our students in. We wanted our groups to feel more like tiny mini communities, where students could create those bonds with students that they do not know, students who might be experiencing the same thing, that same sense of isolation with being stuck at home, and showing them that there was a sense of community. A big part of summer program is the fact that all SWB staff and volunteers and the high schoolers were always super excited to welcome over the participants as they came. following that mantra, we're glad you're here, everyone was always excited, and we just line up and receive students as they came in for summer program. And just that we were striving to make an environment that was welcoming and inclusive for all students. We wanted to make it just as valuable for students who've been coming for summer program for years. And we also wanted to give that same valuable experiences to the students who are coming for their first summer ever. Another thing we did was having those high school participants lead each group. It gave every one of our students a chance to see someone who'd gone through the program and had been successful in the program, and it gave them someone to look up to and someone who could let them know what was coming along and would experience the same thing in their journey. And so with all these things, we came together to put all that together in order to create a summer program that was as inclusive and as welcoming for everyone, especially during a difficult time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. It's hard to believe that's not that long ago, and we're still absolutely dealing with some of those same challenges. So I really appreciate you sharing some of that context and the additional layers. And I think, again, just to bring it back to the thinking about with new Afghan arrivals, I think just what Ryan was describing with the paraeducators, again, thinking about older youth who may be there. In the first session, we had two kind of young alumni who are in community college currently studying, who would be great examples of people that you could engage to bring with you to do presentations or home visits or community visits and neighborhood orientations. It's such an effective strategy in terms of just, having a language competency, and also thinking about how many of the Afghan families have a very high level of education in terms of the roles that they had in Afghanistan coming, that there are a lot of parents that would be excellent at that, and really take a lot of pride in the opportunity to go out and serve their community. Thinking about the ways in which they're also really looking for opportunities to lift up the Afghan community as well, and thinking as they're transitioning here to all the different communities they're being resettled to across the U.S. I think those are some really great strategies and examples that we just heard from Bruno, Kat, and Ryan. And just before we transition to the next piece, I want to give a moment for anybody to have any questions of anything that Bruno, Kat, or Ryan shared. You can feel free to either unmute yourself and ask, or type it up in the chat. And then we're going to move on to the next part to start looking at some specific tools that kind of spell out some of these strategies that that Bruno, Kat, and Ryan have shared. So I'll just pause for a moment for anybody who would like to ask a question. Feel free to unmute yourself, or feel free to type it up in the chat. Okay, well, maybe we'll keep moving, but please feel free to type up a question in the chat as we go, or and I'm sure we can respond specifically. You can feel free to tag one of them if it's a question for one of them specifically. So thank you all so much for sharing, and for the amazing work that you do, and all the thought and care that you put into working with young people in your communities. To Bruno, Kat, and Ryan. I'm going to pass it now to Lindsey to talk us through some of the main tools that SWB uses to kind of capture some of these great ideas and really bring them to life in terms of creating the most welcoming and inclusive program culture possible. So Lindsey, I'll pass it back over to you.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you so much to Bruno and Kat and to Ryan for sharing back your experience. You have such incredible and rich experience to share with this group, and how you put that into words, and really talked about getting kids to the field experiential and having them feel a part of that welcoming community of SWB in the very first moment really stands out. Like Ben said, we're going to pivot to some, I think you said earlier, like the backbone or like behind the scenes strategies of our program model, and how we get everyone thinking like a Coach Bruno or like a Coach Ryan or like a Coach Kat, and thinking about different strategies to create SWB spaces that are inclusive. So as I'm talking through and sharing this framework, which we call the family framework, I'm sure you'll start to hear and recognize some things and strategies that the three of them named, and put into words in another way. So what we're going to do in this portion of the day is share back this framework. It's a tool called the Family Framework that was created with the inspiration or the idea that great coaches make teams feel like family. And in fact, we got that feedback from kids themselves in our youth surveys, that at SWB they feel like family, and our top teams are the ones in which kids really feel that. It's something that we've discovered along the way, again, through youth feedback and from coaches themselves. That when you're with a second family, you have a feeling of welcoming, a feeling of belonging, maybe feeling seen and valued. You're supported to take risks and try new things. These are things that often exist in a family setting, and they can often also exist in a team setting, and they're cultivated by great coaches who take really purposeful and caring and meaningful actions every day. Again, we've seen this in our top coaches and our top teams. And when I say top, I'm not talking about a win-loss record at all. I'm actually talking about a culture of mutual respect, a place where there's a lot of curiosity and cultural humility, and where everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher. I'm talking about teams like Kat's talking about in the participant Faraha, where everyone has really high attendance and people want to come to every activity that is available. Talking about spaces where kids and coaches enjoy so much mutual confidence and trust that they can take risks together. Maybe it's trying a new skill, or trying to be on a new team that you've never been on before, or having a difficult conversation about something that's happening in the community and the world, and knowing that you can turn to your team in that moment to talk through what you're processing. So when I'm talking about our top teams, I'm talking about those spaces where that culture is considered cool, where it's considered cool to welcome the newest members, to support with translation. Caitlin shared out in the chat with the alumni participant. Oftentimes these teams are also top on the field because they are so connected. But what makes them top is actually their connectedness to each other, and that culture of welcoming and belonging on the field. So what we have up on the slide here is this framework that tries to put those stories into actionable and observable behaviors. We know that, like Kat mentioned so well, that in order to cultivate an environment like this, it takes a lot of intention and it takes a lot of care. And it's thousands of small, medium, and big actions, phone calls, that welcomings, high fives, knowing names. These can go seen and unseen, but together they make a team feel like family. So for SWB, as we've grown throughout the years, and we have more and more coaches joining who are serving more and more young people, we sought a way to support those coaches to recognize and take the actions that Kat, Bruno, and Ryan were talking about to cultivate that top team, or to make a team that feels like family. So what we have on our visual here is that family framework. It's a list of all of those actions that make the space feel really welcoming, and again, like family. You can see it's organized to follow the acronym, so that it says family. The top categories, we also call those domains. They stand for like a different focus area that coaches can have for thinking about their coaching. So that there's facilitation, activity, management, identity, learning, and youth center. So those are kind of the overall or umbrella categories or domains for any SWB coach to be thinking about. And under each of them is that list that goes vertically with a set of targets below. So that's kind of the overall view of this tool. We can skip real quickly to the next slide that gives a more granular sense of how this all comes together. That I know this is a lot to look at, so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it, but just wanted to open up the process so you can see that each target under the domain is defined. we actually have 2 pages of these definitions. We thought we'd just share this today to give a sense of what the full tool looks like. And that with this tool, all of our coaches and our community hubs across 3 countries can use this tool to really practice and grow their coaching craft, and make every session feel like family. Coming up with all of these domains and all of these targets was an org-wide effort. And we learned from each other and got feedback from coaches and coordinators and directors in all of those all of our locations, and really tried to distill down what are the difference makers when it comes to running an SWB practice that does look like family. So how it works, a little bit of that's the what and the how. After every practice session, a coach will self-reflect on one of these domains. So they might choose facilitation, or they might choose learning, and they'll self-score 1, 2, 3, 4. I was awesome. 4, I have a bit to improve on. 2 or 3, that didn't go so well. I really need to focus on this next time. A 1. They'll self-score and have an opportunity to reflect on how the day went. Occasionally, also, like another coach, a peer or a supervisor will come out and observe the same targets. That's such a great way to continue to learn and get a different perspective outside of your own of how your practice went. The idea with that is that as coaches self-reflect and also get feedback from others, is that these targets, what looks pretty intimidating right here of this long list of things to do, they become more innate. They become kind of a routinized part of your planning and reflection process, kind of as we heard Bruno and Kat and Ryan sharing. I heard them name some of these targets as they were speaking in a pretty fun and natural way. And that's purposeful for us in our coach training, that from our top coaches, we also see that they are constant learners, and they're constantly reflecting and using the practices are a constant feedback loop too, right? Like, you're getting so much feedback from kids of what's going well and what's to adjust. And this tool invites coaches to reflect on that. And we noticed that before we had the family framework as a tool, some of the coaches who maybe they carpooled together to practice, or they took the same bus home, or in the same direction, they had this opportunity after practice to talk about the session itself. Like, what went well, what didn't go so well, which kids gravitated towards which activities, and maybe did anyone feel excluded by an activity, not purposefully, but that's what happened, and we need to address that and change that for next time. That space is so essential to learning all the time and pushing ourselves to take the care and intention of making a welcoming space. So we also use this tool for coaches to be constantly practicing their craft of self-reflection, and always working towards building a team that feels like family. So we won't spend, I know, too much time on this slide, but what we did today is we wanted to introduce this tool to all of you, and also zoom in specifically on creating a culture where there's a lot of belonging and welcoming. So what Ben and I did was we took 2, 3, or 4 targets from each domain that we think are most relevant to creating a welcoming environment at your practice, and we wanted to walk through those with all of you. So we're lifting these up as top priorities from that long list of, I think it's 64 targets, to make it a little bit more manageable and actually scaffold it for all of you, so that thinking about your next practices or your first clinic, what are the top things that you could do to create that welcoming environment? So in a little bit, we're going to walk through what a full practice session could look like. I wanted to take a few minutes just to walk through each of the domains and bring a few of those targets to life. So we're at facilitation. Facilitation generally is thinking about coach demeanor and your overall approach and presence in the space. Key to that for having a welcoming environment is an opening and closing circle that we've particularly tried to model with the opening circles in this space here. Having a circle at the beginning and the end builds trust. Literally standing in a circle, you can see the picture here, shoulder to shoulder, shows that everyone is equal in the space, everyone is a learner, and everyone is contributing. When I'm in an opening circle, when I'm leading one, I try to invite kids to take on as relaxed as a posture as they want. You can stand, you can sit, you can lie down, do what feels right to you, and join in this space together. I'm also super conscious of my own space. If I'm working with younger kids, shorter kids, I try to make myself a little smaller so there's actually less of a physical divide between us. Think about opening up my arms and my chest a little bit as opposed to crossed. All of those are really immediate physical cues that you can give to start to build that trust. Even something like avoiding wearing sunglasses so kids can see your eyes, even if we're not making eye contact. I think Haseen named that in our first workshop, that can be intimidating, that can be a lot, but for kids to be able to see where you are at. All of that is part of not only what we say, but how we say it to build trust from the very, very beginning in an opening circle. And that can really set the tone for a welcoming environment. Another thing to elevate up here is our grouping strategies. I think, Ryan, you were talking about these as like thinking about intentional groups for the summer program at Vanguard. As people, we gravitate towards groups, right? We gravitate towards our friends or towards cliques or towards a language that we're most comfortable in. What we want to do with grouping strategies is try to break those down and also show each other that we can connect in multiple ways. One of my favorite grouping strategies is a more active one. It's called group up. So if you're in a circle, you could just invite everyone to move around inside of the circle space, even if you were in like a middle circle of a field. Invite people to jog around, maybe do open the gate, close the gate, get moving a little bit. And if I was leading, if I were coach, I would say, you know, when I say a number, get into a group of that number. So if I said 5, get into a group of 5 other people and come together as quickly as possible with that group. Once everyone is in a group together, you can also invite them to share back their name and maybe their favorite food. And once everyone's able to do that and say, okay, separate, we're going to run around again. And now find a group of 3. That's a way not only to get people moving and connected, but it can also facilitate a transition to your next drill or your next exercise. If you need groups of 6 for your next exercise, end with groups of 6 and then have people go on. So that's a little bit of helping kids to find those connections is the point of those grouping strategies too. Like if I say find a partner and you don't know who to choose, or you don't have any friends yet, it's your first day, that feels really bad, right? It feels like you just got excluded because you don't know who to go to. And that's exactly what we want to avoid. So having those facilitation strategies, the grouping strategies, not only breaks down divides, but it ensures that everyone is included when we're making teams, which is so essential to welcoming. So that's a little facilitation. We'll move ahead to activity. That's the next domain. That's thinking about key practice elements and how they're implemented. I think it was Bruno that you shared, like, we want to make sure everyone experiences success, no matter what we do at a practice or a get to know you activity. So here I want to underline team building as having a team building game, particularly for a newer group, a younger group, and getting to know each other, can be a way of ensuring that everyone experiences success before we even touch the soccer ball on the field. And that can really get someone's confidence going and say, like, I am here, I can be here, and I'm going to stay here. One of my favorite ones for that is touch 5 things, which is exactly as it sounds. That as a coach, you can share out, here's a list of 5 things that are on the soccer field or in our space: a tree, a goal, a piece of grass. You come up with the full list and you invite kids to go and touch them as quickly as they can and then come back. It's my favorite part about that is that you can do it with 10 kids or 100 kids. You don't need any setup. And so it's really easy that you don't need to be thinking about in your pre-practice, like, where do I put the cones? How many balls do I need? And then it gets people moving. Plus you might be practicing some new vocabulary. With an older group, maybe it's a team challenge. Everyone do planks and see if we can say everyone's name as we go around in the plank. Something that, again, gets people moving, gets them interacting, and is a space where everyone can contribute and feel valued before we get into more of some of the soccer content. I'm going to move ahead so we can start to think about the practices too. And I just know I'm on the mic a lot, so we're about halfway through. Management is a lot of get them to the field. That's a lot of what our panel shared. Communication, particularly linguistically appropriate communication with partners, with para-navigators, and thinking about departures as well. I'm thinking about when I coached a lot in Seattle, that where we practiced was the school, was at the school where all the kids attended. So actually getting them to the field was less complex, because if they were at school, they could get to the field because it was right there. However, when practice ended, if a kid stayed at practice, it meant that they did not get the school bus home. And kids lived 30, 40 minutes away sometimes by car. So it was really actually important to think about departures before anyone even got to the field, and make sure that there was a transportation plan to get kids home, and thinking about those departures. I saw a question just pop up, so I want to be conscious of it. Was that from Rob? Rob, I'm going to answer now because it's so connected to management and the communication. I think Ryan, Bruno, and Kat all lifted up examples, and Ben has too, of bringing in different types of navigators, cultural appropriate and linguistically appropriate navigators, either within schools or within a community partner like La Colaborativa in Chelsea, or the opportunity to use young alumni or families within the community. And I think it's doing a lot of asset mapping of both, like, what are the languages represented by kids who are participating in programs that you're running, and then who are people within the community that are available and willing to support with some of that translation, both getting them to the field and on the field. I think also if there's a hugely diverse group of languages on the field, speaking less and modeling more, showing more with your hands, and getting kids moving more quickly so that they can connect across activity as they are also growing language becomes relevant. Ben, is there anything you want to add on there?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rob. I think one other strategy that we use a lot in Oakland is having a teammate who is thinking about call, just to do a quick, now with smartphones, it's so easy to do add call, but just talking to a teammate who's been here for longer that might speak the same language, and just saying, hey, we have a new participant who speaks your same language. Can you help me to call them? We do that a lot, or we'll just invite them at practice when they first arrive, to have them partner up for the day with a new participant who has very limited English, might partner up with a participant who's been here longer and speaks their same language. And those are probably the two strategies we use most often. We really do rely on the participants in the program, because 15, 16-year-olds or even 11, 12-year-olds, they have such a big heart for wanting to do that type of work and welcome those new players. So that's a great strategy, and it also doesn't require you to pay somebody else, or it helps them to make the team more their own. So I just wanted to add that as well. Thanks for that question, Rob.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. Let's go ahead to identity. Bruno, you named, in terms of identity, knowing someone's name and pronouncing it correctly. I want to lift that up as the most important thing to think about, especially in the first week, the first practice sessions for building identity. If someone knows your name, you have a sense that they care about you and they want to get to know you better. And if you've met someone multiple times and they still don't know your name, that's also discouraging. Like, hey, we've already met a few times and you're still asking me, or you're still trying to figure out how to remember my name in a sea of a full team. So having a lot of care around remembering names and practicing yourself. I think I'm thinking about a couple of times when I had new teams, or at the beginning of a season, and a lot of new kids all at once. In Boston, what I used to do was we used to take pictures at welcome, here's a picture, and then I would quiz myself. I almost made like note cards of like before the next practice, trying to get to know everyone's name so that it was innate to me, and I could use people's names immediately in our circles and in a welcoming, so that within every practice, kids are hearing that you know their names multiple times, and that you are really focusing in on their identity. All identity is about building up kids' connections to you as the coach and also to each other. So another part of that is creating an environment where kids can recognize each other and celebrate each other's efforts and get to know their names across each other as well. But I think names first and foremost, in addition to creating some structure around rules and recognitions, is super important to creating that identity. I'm going to move ahead to learning. Thanks, Lucas, for all the help with the slides. Learning is about teaching through and about the game. We want to help kids invest in their own learning and also in our own learning as coaches. But we use a phrase sometimes, all teachers are learners and learners are teachers. And we want to bring that to life at the field. I also think about here, regulate, relate, and reason. And we know that learning is most connected to the reason, or our like most complex part of our brain. So I also think about here that the most important thing for learning is to first have an active environment where kids are moving around so they can regulate, and also build that trust that Kat and Ryan and Bruno shared some tactics on. I just want to underline that learning will only happen when there is that trust and there is that regulation. And then once that is there are ways that we can approach being really open to getting feedback from kids of how is the practice going and how is this going for you and why does this matter? I think it could go from being open to getting feedback to improve the practice itself, to asking open-ended questions of, why do you think we're doing this drill? Or what does this passing drill have to do with playing in the game next weekend? And what is the bridge there? Or what does this passing drill have to do with how you communicate with friends and family off the field? And openness to responding to what the needs of the kids are and what will make the learning most relevant to them really stands out to me in this section. And I'm thinking also, Ryan, of your example of openness to what the families were seeking in terms of having more information around COVID navigation in the summer programming. Ben, I saw you hop off mute for a second. Did you have something to add? Or if not, I'll hop to youth-centered.
No, I was frozen, so I was trying to unfreeze myself.
Oh, it worked. It's perfect. You're back. Cool. We're towards the end of family in this quick rundown. So the last one is youth-centered, and always putting youth and their voices at the center of everything we do and all of our practices and all of our design. Language has come up a lot already in questions and in some of our stories, and how to make new participants feel welcome. Ben just shared back a few great examples of pairing kids with official welcomers almost, or translators, to really have that first practice focus. We work so hard to get kids to the field. How can we ensure that their first couple practices go really well? It's by having a youth-centered approach, and asking them how it goes. And as Kat said, thinking about what is going to be most impactful to them to feel connected and trusted and trusting in the space. One other thing I want to highlight here is youth language. If there's new languages on the team, as a coach, trying to get to know a few words of greeting, of welcome, hello in that language can be a really big deal to make someone feel more at ease and more welcome in this space. It's also showing as you may be taking a risk of trying out something that you haven't done before and bringing in that vulnerability to your own coaching and saying like, this is a space where we try new things together. One of the most incredibly youth-centered coaches that I've ever worked with, named Stephanie, at the end of her practices, she had a team with, I think, sometimes 10 to 12 different languages represented. She would invite a new participant from a new language group to lead the team cheer, and the team cheer was together, but every day we said together in a different language. And that was another way of centering the richness and diversity of the team and an opportunity to learn new languages. So I'm going to pause there. The purpose of this section, again, is to share back kind of the backbone, right, of how we make SWB a family-like setting, and zooming in on some specific tactics for creating welcoming and belonging. We are headed to our last section, which is to talk about what this looks like when we look at a full practice. Before we do that, I just want to pause to see if I missed any questions that got chatted out, then maybe you could help me. And also pause if you have a question, please feel free to take yourself off mute, and then we'll transition.
Yeah, I didn't see any new questions come in, Linz, but please feel free if anything that Lindsey shared around the family framework is you wanted to learn more about that or had a question. I think one important note is that we will send this out. The family framework itself will send this out, both the summary version as well as the kind of less visually appealing version that has the target spelled out. That might be a helpful kind of checklist or rubric for yourself as you're going through the programs, or for your coaches if you're managing other coaches. That could be a helpful framework for you. We'll definitely send that out as a follow-up as well. But just before I get into this next part, if you do have any questions, feel free to chat them, or comments. Please also, I know there's a lot of great work being done. If you have anything to add that you think could benefit other people here, that would be most welcome as well. Sounded like maybe somebody had a question there, but I'm having a little trouble hearing.
I don't know if it was a question or also someone just recently joined, so maybe it was some background noise.
Okay.
If that was a question, please chat it out or take yourself off mute again so we can hear. But otherwise, I think you're good to go, Ben.
Okay, great. So I know we've gone over a lot of information and with the family framework. And I think, one of the reasons we wanted to share this is just to say that it really does take a lot of thought and intention to make these spaces feel good and to make young people feel comfortable. But it's worth it. It's really, really worth it. It's really so valuable for somebody who's coming through so much transition, thinking about what's happened in Afghanistan, thinking about what's happening right now in Ukraine, and thinking about people coming, for there to be a space that's this intentional and that's this sort of thoughtful about how we're being in community together. It's really worth it to put some of these ideas in place. And it's also important to name that you don't have to do every single one of those buckets every time. That may not be possible, but having this intentionality and trying to focus in on these things really can be the difference for young people to say, I feel good coming to this place, or you know what, this isn't a place where I feel like I want to be here, which is pretty common for a lot of young people who are experiencing this. They don't feel like the space is designed for them, or they feel like the different barriers in mind are really tough for that type of situation. So what I want to talk about now, is thinking a little bit about a guide for how to actually put this into practice once young people have gotten there. So we've talked a lot about how to get them to the field. Sorry, I have an echo there. Is that maybe okay? There we go. That's better. Some tech issues, but it seems like it's better. And just really thinking about how to structure your practice so that the family framework can come to life. And echo again. I'm going to take my headphones out. I think that might be better. So really thinking about,
I think it might be someone.
How can we structure our practice in a way that that brings some of what Lindsey's been talking about, the family framework, to life? So we think about this in terms of having 4 phases. Thinking about phase 1, youth outreach, preparation, and setup, where the family-focused domains are really management and identity. Phase 2, then the kids are there. We'll have an opening circle with a warm-up, and we get them ready. Now we're turning that into the domains of youth-centered and identity. Phase 3, after they kind of feel welcome, they feel good, they've moved, they've stretched, that people are really starting to focus on facilitation, learning, and activity. And then phase 4, closing circle, reflection, and follow-up, where you start to really focus again, management and learning. So these 4 phases can kind of take you through the flow of how a session can really feel inclusive and welcoming, and can also be fun. I think we need to also not lose sight of all of the intentionality and all of this thought that's going into it. We still want to make something that feels fun, that feels progressive, progressive in the sense that there's movement from one aspect to another, that there's a flow, a natural flow, that they're getting to learn skills and apply them, that they're getting to play, that they're getting to move in the context while all this is also happening, where there's all these different components. So in the last little section of today, I want to kind of zoom in on each of these phases. So I'll talk about phase 1 and phase 3, and Lindsey will talk about phase 2 and phase 4, and then we'll wrap up. And again, we'll send these tools out, including a practice plan format that kind of captures what I'm talking about here with the 4 phases. So with that in mind, if we can go to the next slide. So thinking a little bit more, zooming in on this first phase of youth outreach preparation and setup, we've talked already a lot about youth outreach and the different strategies to get them to the field. I think once you have your group identified, best practice is definitely to send reminders to youth about the upcoming session. That could be a WhatsApp group. That's been a really successful strategy in Oakland, where we have a WhatsApp group with our participants, or a text message, or it could be our staff are at school sites and they go around at lunch to remind students that there's practice coming up, and thinking about transportation plan if that's something that's going to be necessary. I think the location of the field and making that as easy as possible so that it's close to where families live. I can't overstate how important that is. If it's close and convenient to where people live or where they're going to school, attendance and engagement is going to be so much higher. Transportation plan also, when you have a brand new group and you think about this context of the newly arriving Afghan families who may be in their first month here, having just come out of some of the bases where they've been staying. Something that we've done in Oakland is have everybody meet so the IRC, the International Rescue Committee, is one of the resettlement agencies where all the families used to have to go for help with housing, for help with just getting set up with some of the fundamentals, the basics. So they were all familiar with that space. In the early days of SWB Oakland, we would have families come meet there outside, and then we would all go together to the park, either on the bus, or if we were able to walk to a park that was close by, that was something that would work. Thanks, Lucas. So I think that's one important piece of the first aspect for youth outreach. In terms of the preparation, I think I won't go too in detail, but I think just having the more prepared you are, having this laid out for yourself before you get there, it's going to be much smoother. I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about this aspect of the setup. So I think something that we've tried to do consistently in Oakland is having words or signs that include languages of the youth that are participating. So thinking about Afghan youth having signs where they can see their language, whether that's Dari, whether that's Pashtun, maybe having both, having that written up, or even having the program rules and agreements in multiple languages so that people can see and kind of understand what this is about, goes a long way into something feeling familiar. If you've ever been in another country where you don't recognize the language or the symbols or the characters, it can feel really intimidating. You see these signs and you're not quite sure what that means. Just having something there that, oh, they're thinking, they're aware of where I'm coming from, can make a huge difference. Name tags. Lindsey talked about how important it is, and Bruno talked about how important the being able to use people's names and pronounce them properly. It's so much easier to properly pronounce names that may be unfamiliar to you if you're able to see them written out, and that can make a huge difference in terms of that. And you don't have to buy name tags every time. We've used masking tape, like good masking tape, and just have that there. Have your staff use those as well. It goes a huge long way to making people feel comfortable asking you for something. Thinking about equipment, really, really important. A lot of times youth are not going to have equipment. Obviously, this is not a mandatory thing, but it can go a really long way to making people feel comfortable. If you can get some donated cleats, we have that usually where it's kind of a rental system where people can come check them out, bring them back at the end of practice, and over time they can earn those. They can earn the ability to keep those things. These are just some important points around this first phase, and I'm gonna pass it over to Lindsey to talk about the second phase.
Cool, thanks, Ben. I also just wanted to pause on a question that we had come in about including a visually impaired participant in a practice. One thing that actually immediately came to mind was a game called Goal Ball, which is using a ball that has like a noise inside of it. And I've actually done like a team building trip once in Seattle where we went to another program that ran Goal Ball, and our visually abled participants were able to play with visually impaired participants to play, which I don't know if that completely gets at the question that came out. I think if that's not available or that involves resource that's not possible, I would think about other ways to create a space where that participant could safely participate and be involved in potentially some team building games or skill building games that are more individualized and maybe less interdependent, if not being able to see would be a safety issue, or if there's ways for them to be a leader on the team and be a part of the community culture. And also I want to underline that that's something that that type of inclusion for a participant that is visually impaired is something that I personally don't have as much like lived experience with. So I also don't want to act like I have the perfect answer there by any stretch. So I also invite if others in this space have resources to offer up or ideas to offer up to share them out here. And same for you, Ben, if anything comes to mind as I head over to phase 2. But thank you for the question so much. Phase 2 is looking at opening circle and the warm-up that we've gotten to speak through a little bit already, but the family focus in these areas is youth-centered and identity, thinking that this is, like towards Ben's point, like we've done so much to get kids to the field, and now this is the moment when they're at the field. The focus that we want to have at the very beginning of practices is to make kids feel connected to the space and centered in the space, and that their identity is the most important thing, and that their voice is the most important thing. So in an opening circle, there's a great shot of Ben here in an opening circle. You can see his physical space is one that is inviting. Arms are open, and he is playing alongside the kids. We want to think about, for me, a successful opening circle is one in which everyone is speaking or interacting, that they have a chance to talk in front of the entire group or with a partner, or show back with a gesture how they're doing for the day. That can be as simple as a fist to 5. Tell me how you're feeling through the day. I had an incredible day, an all-star day. It was a 5. I had a really cruddy day and I need a reset. That could be a fist. Asking kids to share back where they're feeling in a fist, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is a basic way to start to have an interaction and show that you care, check in with them. And it also gives you a clue as a coach. If anyone said a fist, a 1 or a 2, that's someone to prioritize checking in with at a water break or a downtime, a transition to see what else could happen during the day to support them and help to turn maybe that 0 into a 2 or that 2 into a 4. That's one thing I want to elevate from opening circle. Warm up is a time where we can start to have movement and bring some rhythm in. It can involve a lot of stretching, bringing kids into a circle and playing and moving. Again, that gets us to rhythm. That gets us to like a regulated mind. I like to call kids in an inviting way, like 10, come on in, 9. Clap with me, 8, and you can bring some rhythm to that. And that can also happen in stretching, of having one kid lead and another, and the group respond. I say 1, everyone else says 2. Those get people connected to the space, contributing. It could be in multiple languages, and also getting ready for the activities themselves. Warm-ups can be things like a team builder, like a touch 5 things, or it could be something, maybe if it's a more soccer focused or formal group, like a professional warm-up. Some kids really, really respond to that. Professional warm-up, I mean like taking like a Barcelona warm-up and doing that with the kids. And that can also be really fun to have that routine, that at some point, if you do it enough, then kids can add to it, and also kids can be the leaders of it, right? So those are just a few things that I want to elevate from the opening circle and the warm-up, and how you can use that space to really double down on the kids themselves and their voices. So I'm going to pass it back over to Ben for phase 3. Oh, Ben, you're on mute.
Thank you. I just wanted to really elevate one thing Lindsey said about stretching and the use of different languages. So I think one important thing around thinking about specifically working with Afghan youth is you may have some time when it's only Afghan youth, but more often you'll have some Afghan youth and some youth from other communities, whether that's US born or other immigrant communities that you're welcoming them into. And I think having a space where they can share aspects of their language and culture and have that really feel welcomed is such an important thing. And having people gain a curiosity around, okay, how can we count to 10 in your language? Or, how can we learn to greet each other? Can make that feel so welcome, make them feel so welcome, and really thinking about that as a, as a minor thing, but it's something that, people kind of have to sometimes, youth have told me they sort of have to feel like they leave that part of themselves at the door in order to come into these spaces. And so when you're asking them to bring that out, it's a really small thing, but it can be a big, and thinking about the theme of the session today, inclusive program culture, making people feel welcome, something small like that really can go a long way to making people feel part of that. So the phase 3, and we're going to move through these pretty quickly, just looking at the clock and also just thinking about timing. But now we're really starting to to get to where they're moving, where the kids are moving. They come here for soccer. They came because they liked soccer. They were interested in soccer. So we really want to have dynamic, fun activities in the drill, applied game, and scrimmage, and you want them to build on each other. So thinking about a skill that can be applied in a game and that can be emphasized in the scrimmage. Get players moving. Lindsey talked about this already, but using visual demonstrations and really breaking down the teachable components is a key best practice, not only for newcomer youth, but for any kind of coaching principles. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that as a concept. So I think we can go to the next slide here. I really can't emphasize enough that letting kids, scrimmage is not a universal word, but a time in which they're just playing the game. I think sometimes, we want to do all these other things and we get away from, just the benefit of that being on a team together, and really just letting people play the game unencumbered, even if that's small-sided, letting people play, letting them enjoy, not being too, interactive. You can pull people out and do some coaching points on the side, but let soccer do its work. Let soccer have its time. In the context of all these other pieces, it's still important to have a significant amount of your session be dedicated to the game unencumbered, because that is ultimately what a lot of the kids came to do. I think especially as you get into older age groups, that's even more true. So just want to encourage that. And I'll pass it back to Lindsey for phase 4 and to wrap us up, take us home.
Thanks, Ben. So phase 4 is thinking about the closing circle on the field, and then also that an extra layer of the closing as a coach. In both of those, the family focus is management and learning. At this point in the session, at this point in the day, we've gotten to have an opening, we've gotten to play, we've gotten to move, we've gotten to interact, we've had a technical drill, we've had a game, and we've got to play and enjoy the sport and enjoy the joy of sport. The closing circle, everyone coming back together, shoulder to shoulder, is a great way to check in and say, how did it go? If it's a newer group, I would come with questions ready to go in the forced choice. Like, did you like the first drill or the second drill better, and get feedback on that? Or did you think that was good? so or bad, and get some live feedback that's super helpful to you as a coach, and also for a way for kids to engage in their learning process and connect to it and connect more to their rational brain. I think if it's a group that you're getting to know better, or depending on the language context, you can start to ask, like, what's the relevancy of this almost? Why do you think we did this today? How does this matter to the game of soccer? How does this matter to life? And what did you think about this? So there's an aspect of learning of what did we all just do together? What did we all just experience? And what are the group's reflections, and also an aspect of learning of how did this go, and is there any feedback that you want to share in this space and in creating that environment. In a closing circle, it's also a wonderful time to recognize and honor the participation of the crew and the team. At SWB, we like to do that through something called shout outs or kilos, depending on where you are in your location. But it's a way of recognizing positive contributions that individuals or groups have made to the space. One thing that we could share out later is a format for that called TLC, which is, I think, a singing group, and also it's tell it, label it, celebrate it. So you say something that you saw from a teammate that you want to recognize and honor, you label it, and then you invite everyone to celebrate, clap alongside, give them a clap on the back. That is a huge way to make someone feel seen and valued and cared for in this space, and also lift up some of the aspects of program culture that you want to continue to see and continue to reinforce in the next sections, or the next sessions, sorry. So that's some things that can happen in the closing circle with kids. Just a thing to underline is, again, about departures, and practice doesn't end at the closing circle. It ends when everyone is safely transported or transporting home. So just being cognizant of that. And the last point is thinking about your own reflection as a coach and talking with other assistant coaches, lead coaches that were at the practice field. We already talked through it a lot, right? We offered up the family framework as an avenue for that reflection. If that's something that suits you and you want to try to use, please do. There's also so many other wonderful, incredible frameworks to use. You could do a stop, start, continue, a rosebud thorn. Just talk through what things went well, what things to adjust for your management of the next practice, because we are always learning, and the kids give us so much feedback explicitly and implicitly at every session. So what format you use is less important than just finding the time immediately after a practice to get some reflections and get some feedback personally and with others around you. And with that, that's the end of our phases, which is the end of the practice itself, which leads us to our own closing circle, which we'll make brief. But first and foremost, just want to recognize everyone here who's here live or watching later. Just appreciate you showing up and engaging in this community and learning in this way. We really appreciate that you're here and that you're doing this work. And please keep sharing amongst each other. A few wrap-up logistics that you would also want to do in a closing circle with kids is tell them what to expect next. If we had another session, I would say when the next session is, and I would want to do that with kids too. We don't have a next session, but we do have some wrap-up. So we'll share out the recording later today. We'll follow up with a survey, and we'll send out the supplemental materials that we've been referencing throughout today's call, the family framework, 9-point practice plan. There's also just so many resources online. Google, I think that's where we found a lot of our favorite team building games too. So we can send out some ideas and also encourage everyone to use the internet that's available to keep your own learning going and keep thinking about what would be best for the kids that you're working with. So with that, I think we can close out for the day. Ben, is there anything you want to add before we call it?
No, just thank everybody for coming and for all the work that you're doing. And a special thanks to our panelists. Really appreciate everybody coming and sharing.
Wonderful. Okay.
Well, have a wonderful day, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Wonderful day too.